For the first time in my life, I am able to be working in a team lead capacity, something that I've always felt I could do, but I never had the opportunity to do it. For the longest time in my life, I was thinking of myself as a very rational person, a very logical person. But the longer I am doing things that I'm doing with music, work, personal relationships, with everything, the more I'm coming to value the worth of quote unquote intuition, let's say. Us coming from Poland, I think there's a lot of magnetism towards the other part of that spectrum, right? That you
Mm,
should doubt yourself more because if you
right.
show off too much, if you believe in yourself too much, if you talk about your accomplishments too much, that's bad. You're having a conversation and something triggers you and you get mad. And then you click leave on the video call.
Yeah.
And then I would ask myself, okay, but why did I get angry? And a lot of the time, I wasn't angry at the person. I was angry at myself, actually, and say that, okay, so if I cannot be 100% sure, then I need to trust my gut. Whether I look at it from 17 angles and take a month to decide, or I sort of rein that in a little bit, the outcome may be the same or even better. You go on Instagram, you go on TikTok, you go on YouTube, and you have a 7-year-old kid who does what you do 100 times better, or does something
Yeah.
that you will never be able to do. So if your
Yeah.
goal is to be the best in the world at something, you will probably fail because there will always be someone better than you, but
Mm,
there will never be someone who is better than you at being you. When the CEO of Spotify goes out and says that the process of creating music is creating content, it's full of friction and it's bad. So we would like to have everyone using AI. When you have a lot of that background noise to like true human creativity and true original thought, the only thing you can combat this is being yourself and being original and drawing from your own experiences with your voice if you want to preserve the human aspect of it and
mhm.
not have it sound like AI autotune or whatever, then you can't. So you have to accept it. You have to accept that this is my voice, this is the way I sound, and it's best that you come to like it at least.
This is making me think about AI and about how creation is commodified. You can generate anything. And I think in a world where creation is commodified, performance is the one remaining frontier of what is still real. You can't make the AI perform the thing. It's something we can perform in front of y'all, and you can feel that we're having fun doing it. I'm taken back to like the gigs that we did together. That's why part of why it felt so great. Maybe there'll be this huge silver lining to all of this that okay, if I can't trust anything that's, showing up on my screen of doom, maybe I should just go out, meet people, go to a live concert, go to live gigs of underground bands like Omegalodon. This is very important. The only takeaway from this episode.
Then Nicolas Cage, Mr. Cage, if you are listening, if you like these ideas, please. My email
Oh.
is easy to find.
Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to the Silk and Spider podcast. The podcast for people who believe that one connection can change everything, even the trajectory of your life. My name is Jakub Grajcar. I'm the creator of Silk and Spider. This is one of the very first episodes, and I'm extremely excited to introduce Radek Wiejek to the show. Radek, how are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. Doing good. Hopefully, we'll be doing better through the course of this conversation.
Typically goes like that. It does. Watchers and listeners, you might be curious who Radek is. Well, professionally, Radek is team lead at Force of Nature. In just a second, Radek, I'll let you explain what the Force of Nature is. Personally, well, we go a little while back, studied at the same faculty. My first memory of you is you were this guy who was walking in shorts, in like barely above freezing weather is what it felt like, on your way to the university, wearing all black clothes with some cool, band t-shirt on. And I had no idea who you were, but I was like, I need to meet that guy. And eventually we did meet. That's a whole story in itself. We both love metal music and we both played in a band at one point. So you're the founder, guitar player and vocalist, and then some producer.
Yeah.
Yeah, at Omegalodon. So that's the only progressive black metal band. Black Doom. What do you call yourselves these days? Like everything goes.
Sludge, let's say. Black and
Yeah,
sludge,
yeah,
progressive. There's a lot of things. You just need to listen to it. That's
yeah. Exactly. Definitely, that's something that's landing at the very top of the show notes today. So, personal friend, and I've got a couple things that I want to talk with you about. You're one of the most creative people that I know, so maybe our conversation will go in that direction. But that all depends on how you answer the main question of the show, the question about the connection that changed everything or a lot for you. First of all, though, just for context, force of nature, what is that? Do you do like sports ski or something? That's a joke. Please explain.
Okay. So, if looking at the surface, you could say that Force of Nature is a digital marketing agency, and we do all the usual stuff, let's say. So, we can take care of your Google ads, we can take care of your analytics, we can take care of your meta ads, your overall digital marketing strategy, all that good stuff. However, looking a little bit below the surface and talking a little bit more about the values that we bring to the relationship with the client and amongst the team is that we don't bullshit anyone. We say it like it is, and our goal, providing that we get the access level that is required to do that. If you come to me with your business and say that I would like to grow it, I would like to do some cool stuff with it, I won't say, yeah, so we have a Google Ads campaign and we will do a campaign for you. No, it's an entire strategy. The best case scenario is looking at the entire business, the margins, all the other investments, the profits, and all of that, because we believe that, especially in today's world, all of that is very, very, very much connected. And just looking at one piece of that puzzle is, in 99% of cases, not enough.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell that you spend some of your time trying to convince people to kind of come on board and become Force of Nature clients. And that's fun about a show like this, is that like I can see us exploring so many different avenues here. We'll see where we go. Before we move on, for context, I mentioned you work and you mentioned what Force of Nature is, an agency, and you mentioned, a lot of the approach. I mentioned the music path. What else did I not mention about you that the Watchers and listeners should know about you?
Well, you mentioned that we studied together, right?
Right,
So
yeah.
so we did study. We both majored in English within
Mhm.
conference interpreting. So that was also a part of my life and my professional life as well. And I think that's a profession that requires specific skills, both in the, let's say, the language and the knowledge department, but also in the soft skills department a lot, because you have to be good with people, both
Yeah.
listening and being conscious, of what you're saying and how you're saying that, and I think that's something that does translate to a lot of different things, to your professional life, to your personal life, and all that.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I should have mentioned that. We even did conference interpreting together at this physiotherapy course. Good times. And I can say about those times is, well, it was hard work, definitely. We were doing this in these half-hour intervals. Like you jump in for half an hour, I jump in for half an hour. Long walks right next to the hotel there, and a lot of introspection besides, and conversation. Plus, I feel like that was the point in my life when my brain felt the most agile in terms of language, because having to constantly interpret, for even 8 hours a day, and we were doing it like 5 days a week at that point because the course was in those kind of blocks of like 2 weeks, for example. That was very stimulating. That was very stimulating. Would I like to do that? Would I like to be doing that now? Not sure, but it was a fun adventure. I don't know. How do you remember it?
I remember it very fondly because I totally agree. Very, very stimulating intellectually, but also very rewarding because what I like challenges. I like difficult things because I like that feeling at the end of the day that you did something that you feel that it was rewarding, right? And it wasn't a walk in the park.
Hmm.
So that definitely wasn't a walk in the park, even though there were walks in the park, in bricks, like you mentioned, right?
Exactly.
But I like things that are rewarding, and that was definitely rewarding and very stimulating, because when you are an interpreter, of course, you can be specialized in niches. And those that are the best of the best at what they do, they are. There are interpreters that specialize in legalese, let's say, or in medical interpreting. But sort of what we did for some time when we wanted to establish ourselves in that industry, let's say, was that you
Yeah,
pretty much do what is there for you, right? So it
exactly.
was at the same time a little bit scary, because one week you could do the physiotherapy course, and the next week you could do a design conference in Warsaw. True story. And the
Yeah.
next week you could be at an art gallery opening, right? So it's very, very diverse if you want it to be, and if you have those opportunities. And at the same time, that makes it even more stimulating because you basically have to learn pretty much another trade as
True.
best as you can in as short a time as you can.
Yeah.
What I also liked about it, and some people call me crazy for liking this, is that it also required a great deal of improvisation and thinking on your feet. Because
I like that too. I love that too. Yeah.
so maybe you are both crazy, in a similar way.
Yes.
Yeah, but I really like that because what I don't like sometimes is when you get really, really good at something in a particular environment, for example, in one company, and you feel that you know everything. That people look up to you, ask you for things, and you have an answer for almost everything. And that's a sign of two things. One, that is you're becoming too comfortable, and probably like the environment around you becomes a little bit stale and doesn't
Yeah.
move with the times, it doesn't evolve, right? So this is something that I try not to do and not to have professionally. So having that in interpreting that you had a lot of those different kinds of environments and topics, that was, like you said, really stimulating and exciting and scary, but sometimes that's
Yes.
it.
I mean, there's a lot of stress, but it was a lesson in how to deal with the stress and how to show up well despite the stress. I think, there was a lot of taming of that feeling during that time. All right. Well, thank you for sharing about that. I have let this go on for too long. It's time to get to the question of the show because I really, really, really need to know that about you and about some other people who are mutual acquaintances of ours, but you're the one that I'm starting with here. So, for the question of the show, what Silk and Spider is all about? What is, for you, one connection, a person, a place, an organization, or just an idea that changed the trajectory of your life?
All right, that connection would be Scientology. No, that's a joke.
Okay.
No,
I bought it.
I thought about it for quite some time because you did pose that question to me beforehand. And I thought about it for some time and I had different ideas, but I decided to land at an answer that I think is most true to me, especially at this point in my life. And I hope that this won't sound like I am full of myself. And hopefully, this conversation will allow me to explain it better. But I would say that that is a connection with myself, understanding
Gosh.
myself better and having an ability to be introspective, as you also mentioned this a couple of minutes ago. And at one point, introspective, but also being able to look at yourself and what you do and what you think from an outside perspective as much as that is possible. So let's start with that and see how you roll with it.
I love that. I fucking love it. I mean, this is a subject that has been on my mind recently. I was a guest on another podcast and I was talking about it too. So I guess it's kind of fate that we're talking about it. Well, so when did you first meet? Okay, no, never mind. Well, so what I definitely want to know and I definitely want you to do is explain yourself. Why did you choose this one? This is a very spicy choice, if I may say so.
Spicy. Yeah. I like spicy food, so it tracks. Well, like I said, I think this is the most true and honest answer, especially right now, because I've had a couple of, let's say, different experiences throughout especially the last couple of years when I'm working at Force of Nature, especially. And for the first time in my life, I am able to be working at a team lead in a team lead capacity, something that I've always felt I could do, but I never had the opportunity to do that. And right now, I have that opportunity because I was trusted by the larger team to take on those responsibilities. And during that time, there were a lot of trials and tribulations, difficult clients, difficult partners, team members, all of that, and socio-economic situations that have an impact on all of that. Also, I think the fact that this year I will be turning 36. So I am no longer a spring chicken, probably. I'm not saying I'm old, hopefully, but
Nobody's saying that, Radek. You're good. We're good. Me being just 2 years younger than you, we're good.
sure, yeah. So, but what I'm driving at with this is that there is some. Again, I'm using big words. I hope that I'm not sounding full of myself. That with age and experience, if you add a layer of introspection on it and add that outside perspective, there comes some, let's say, wisdom with that.
Right?
And I think that on the one hand, whereas for the longest time in my life, I was thinking of myself as a very rational person, a very logical person that was driven by, let's say, data, by arguments, by logic. But the longer I am doing things that I'm doing with music, with work, with personal relationships, with everything, the more I'm coming to value the worth of quote unquote intuition, let's say. And the way I looked at it before, the way I had looked at it before was that, that this is a little bit, bullshit. And so like mojo voodoo stuff that, yeah, this is something that, you say when you don't have arguments. Like you say, yo, I have the gut feeling or
I
into
just feel it. It
yeah,
just came to
yeah,
me.
yeah, you just feel it. Yeah. But the way I am looking at it right now is that if you are getting this gut feeling about something, it's actually not irrational, but it's just that your subconscious, your unconscious, whatever you believe in, or whatever you want to, however you want to visualize that, is telling you something that is it's actually based on your experiences, on your
Hmm.
previous experiences, or previous connections, previous events. And even though you cannot like pinpoint a specific chain of cause and effect that brought this feeling to you, it doesn't mean that it isn't there. It's just that it's not apparent to you at this moment in time.
Yeah, yeah. This reminds me, out of all things, this reminds me of playing an instrument. So, and this is something that, and again, for context, I became a musician under your, okay, another big word, tutelage, mentorship, because you needed a bass player for your band. And that's why I picked up the bass. And it was such a great adventure to do
You
that.
stepped up. You stepped up big times.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot, man. So let me try to explain. You pick up an instrument and you have to think about everything. You have to analyze everything. If I press here on the fretboard in a certain way, I'll get this sound. And depending on my tuning, I'll get a different sound, even on the same place of the fretboard, right? But then you play and you play and you play. And in your case, you go through various experiences in life. You go through, work experience with relationships, all of that stuff. And at some point, you just know. You know what kind of sound you're going to get if you make certain movements on the fretboard. It becomes intuitive, but it doesn't mean it's not rooted in knowledge and it's not rooted in experience. So maybe this is, I'm getting really, really philosophical here, but maybe this is an appropriate thing to happen as we get older, slightly older, is that we start to depend more on the gut feeling because the gut has had some time to learn some things. And, I want to ask you if that tracks. Does that fit what you were thinking about, or am I off base here?
No, I think it tracks. I think it tracks some. Of course, there is. I also believe that, and that may sound a bit trite, but I think it's true, that there needs to be a balance to everything as well. And if you go too much in one direction, that's also bad, right? So if in the realm of what we are talking right now, you could go, 100% being a little bit full of yourself and thinking, yeah, I always have the right answers because I am experienced, or I have this great conviction that this is what should be done, and I believe it 100%. And if you are saying otherwise, then I don't care what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah,
But I think that if you go into the other direction 100%, then there's crippling self-doubt there, right? When you absolutely do not believe in yourself, your judgment, your convictions, you don't have convictions.
yeah,
And and both of these are bad. So sort of having a place somewhere in the middle where you can sit and respect yourself, but at the same time question yourself a little bit, because that's the sort of a big part of what I would like to communicate here, is that it's not 100% intuition of what my gut feeling is, but also question yourself, but not too much. So I know it sounds, I may sound like it's easy, but it's 100% isn't.
it's
But
hard.
I think that there is a cultural aspect to it as well, like especially us coming from Poland. I think there's a lot of, let's say, magnetism towards the other part of that spectrum, right? So that you should doubt yourself more, because if you
Right.
show off too much, if you believe in yourself too much, if you talk about your accomplishments too much, that's bad. That's
You
bad.
have to be humble. You have to be humble. And also, there's this almost national lack of self confidence. You're just a small country in Eastern, okay, that's going to trigger some people, right? Eastern Europe, Central Europe, whichever. Who are we to say anything with any degree of confidence unless we have some, really, really hard data to back it up? So that certainly tracks. Finish your thought by all means.
Yeah, so in that cultural context, I think that it would do a lot of good for a lot of us Poles to sort of get that magnet to the other side of the spectrum and sort of pull the center of gravity a little bit to this side, to believing in yourself a little bit more. Because I still have that mechanism that I always question everything. I question what the government says. I question what the media says. I question what the clients say. I question what my team members say. I question what I also think. Right? I think it's a big part of that. However, I think that, let's say, if we wind the clocks back like 5 or 6 or 7 years, uh, 7 years, then I would say I was questioning myself too much. That I didn't give enough credit to that gut feeling, to that experience. And what's helped me was the realization when I was thinking about a couple of different decisions that I made in my life when I listened to advice that came from a very good place, I'm sure, from people that cared about me. But I wasn't sure if that is the correct course of action for myself. And I did something, and I did go with that advice. And at the end of the day, when I sort of reflected upon that, I decided I came to the realization that it wasn't the right choice for me.
I see.
So you might look at that with regret, but I think that's not really productive. It's human, but it's not really productive. So I could hold on to that for a minute and then try to sort of wash it away, and then focus on what it means, and then try to avoid that in the future. So that was the sort of realization, a little bit aha moment for me, that you can trust your gut.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna need details on that, but in just a second, I just wanted to add a little bit of a thought to what you said before. So, as I was preparing to run these first interviews, I decided to listen to a couple interview podcasts myself, and one that I came back to is the Rich Roll podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's one of the biggest ones for people focused on high performance. There's a fitness and health component to it. So sometimes he would interview like a top life coach, one of the best coaches in the world. Maybe sometimes like a healthcare expert, like a neurobiology expert, all sorts. Right. I was listening to that conversation just earlier today, and it's so interesting how similar types of thoughts and advice are expressed both on a podcast with 2.5 million YouTube subscribers and over here on Silken Spider, because there was this topic of, I'll put the specific episode in the show notes, for credit purposes of the idea. But the guest was talking about like non-duality or like false binaries in terms of choosing between one or another end of a spectrum, like you just said, only rational or only intuitive, only grind or only like letting yourself go too much and being too easy on yourself. Never just one or the other, always balance. It's such a unsatisfying answer because people seek that clarity of, okay, I just need to do X. But unfortunately, sometimes it's both. They did, however, share this interesting thought of seasons, You may never choose one or the other. It's just a matter of, in this current season, what are you focusing more on? Right now, I almost said moron. Moron.
What are you
Yeah,
talking to me? Oh, how did you call me?
I'm so sorry, man. So I'm not cutting that out, by the way. We need to have fun on the show,
Good.
otherwise it won't work.
It's honesty, integrity, being true.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, I guess that's where I would leave that thought. I was going to ask you, and you kind of teed it up beautifully. Okay, so the connection you picked is yourself, but I still need to see some of these moments. These moments when your relation to yourself changed. When was that? What kind of situation was it? These bad decisions, or kind of, the moments when you took advice that maybe you should have more listened to yourself. Can you paint us a picture of a particular point in time when that relationship changed? You, yourself, and you.
Okay. Unfortunately, it's going to be another, at least I think on the surface. I will try to make it deeper, but on the surface, that might be a little bit of an unsatisfying answer because
Huh?
there's no one event, let's say, that would point to that. But what I would say is that it's a collection of experiences and a collection of moments of self-reflection that that allowed me to get to the point where I was comfortable with this thought, and that so what I would say is just a pretty much constant process of reflection, to be honest, and
Hmm.
self-reflection and thinking about, you know, what are you doing? What are you saying? And why that happens. Because, for example, you could have a bad experience at work, let's say with someone,
Hmm.
and you're having a conversation and something triggers you and you get mad, for example, and say, yeah, you might be even like rude to that person for some reason. And then you click leave on the video call because, that's the reality of working right now for a lot of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what I would do in that moment is I would ask myself, okay, but why did I get angry? And I think that is a actually really good and potent question that maybe we don't ask ourselves enough. And a lot of the time, what I found out is that I wasn't angry at the person. I was angry at myself actually because the way it worked, it sort of triggered something in me. And that I realized that, for example, my reaction wasn't enough, or that, for example, I thought that I was attacked in some way, or maybe it wasn't the intention of that person, but the thought came to my mind that, okay, so this means that I am doing a bad job at something. So even though the reaction was outward,
Yeah.
the actual root cause was in.
Yeah, yeah, I understand that. Tell me about this idea of following your intuition more through the lens of, let's start with your work and leadership at work. So, what's the difference between being more analytical as you manage a team versus what you're now talking about and what you're now feeling with following your intuition more? What's happening in your head? How do the thoughts differ?
Okay. Well, there's a couple of different aspects to that. The one of them is time, because
Hmm.
you could go into analyzing things from a gazillion angles, and that could bring you into a decision paralysis where you don't do anything for quite some time. And that's bad,
Right.
obviously.
Yeah.
That's easy to recognize. The second thing is that after some time, after some experience, at least that happened to me, I realized that that's a little bit of a rude awakening. But most of the decisions you make, especially the decisions that matter in some way, when it comes to your relationships, when it comes to a lot of things that you do at work, you don't know at the moment of making that decision or making that action, you don't know 100% if that's the right decision, if that's the right thing to do. Sometimes it's, a long time has to pass. Sometimes, weeks, months, a year needs to pass when you can just, let out a sigh of relief and say to yourself, okay, that was a good decision. I made the right choice. So this, and I'm also like a big believer of in the fact that in the idea that you can look at pretty much everything in two ways. You can spin it positively, you can spin it negatively. And the
Right.
negative spin on that would be that you can never know for sure. So, why bother, for example? Or maybe that can paralyze you even more. But you can look at it from a positive angle and say that, okay, so if I cannot be 100% sure, then I need to trust my gut. And whether I look at it from 17 angles and take a month to decide, or I sort of rein that in a little bit, the outcome may be the same or even better.
Yeah, yeah. When I'm thinking about this again through the lens of leadership, two things come to mind. One is I am, at a 30-person company, I'm right now person number 4, right? So I'm kind of close to the top when it comes to leadership. And also at other companies in other contexts, I had a chance to listen or to at least kind of be a witness to some of these big decision making moments. And it's shocking to me how often top leaders have so little time to make some of the most important decisions, An employee, for example, might say, I want this kind of raise or I walk, and they're like a load bearing employee in an organization. Or there's an opportunity to make like a huge pivot. We would have to change our product development for the next few months, just to fit this one huge project, but it could, let's say, double our money, something like that, just for simplicity's sake. And you have to make these decisions like typically like by end of day, end of business day. You've got your docket full of so many meetings and so many different threads, and yet you need to decide. And in those instances, sure, you can have a conversation, you can do a little bit of analysis. At the end of the day, though, you need to make that decision. One thing that also comes to mind, the other thought is, don't you think it's not so much about the decision as it is about the follow through? Like, in your experience, have you been more frustrated with leaders who decided badly, or those who never could commit to one decision, change their minds constantly, and that, meant that nobody really know what was happening or what the direction was? Because I gravitate to the latter.
Okay, so those that were sort of either paralyzed with making that decision, or the follow through was sucked, right? That's what you mean.
No, I rather mean that, is it better to make a bad decision with conviction and kind of execute with conviction? Or is it better to, or rather worse, right? Is it worse that, that decision gets postponed? It's like a half decision, half measures, and you never really see, the leadership follow through.
Well, both are bad. So
Of course.
so it's difficult sort of to give some weight to this. I would say that of course the best case scenario is to make the good decision, follow through correctly, and all of that. So,
Sure.
but I think at the end of the day, a bad decision is a bad decision. And I don't think it really matters one way or the other too much, whether it's badly followed through or not followed through at all. If it's a bad decision, it's a bad decision. But it doesn't mean that you cannot make bad decisions. We all make them, right? From time to time. So what I would say is, what's an important quality in leaders, and are you really, like, for example, and right now, are you surprised that we went philosophical? But like, because I don't think we should.
Knowing us, no, not
Yeah,
necessarily. No.
yeah. So I think that it's not only in work. It's like it's in life in general, I would say, and that whenever you make a bad decision, it's how quickly you realize it is a bad decision and how quickly it can pivot into a better decision. And I'm not saying I'm the master of that, by no means, by no stretch of the imagination, but I am still learning that. But I think that this is a very, very important quality as well.
I mean, it's almost like, think of bad decisions in miniature. You go to a restaurant and you pick a meal and you're not happy with it. Bad decision, consequences of it, minimal. But there's still this room of, you can make the best of a bad situation, or you can let that ruin your evening. You can complain about it all the time. You can, just make it ruin your mood, or you can say, okay, learning experience. It's every time there's some learning from it, and you build your intuition based on that. I see two paths forward from this point on, and one, speaking of bad decisions, one bad decision was I did not press you enough on what you mentioned earlier. You said there were a couple decisions when you listened to advice and it led to bad outcomes. And look, for this podcast, we want to tell some of these stories of what specifically happened, if you're able to, right? Can you tell us about what you were facing and what was the advice, why it had a bad outcome? Because I feel like, anybody listening to this would be curious about, like, what is this specific situation? It felt like that was a watershed moment in your relationship to yourself, where you felt that, or at least a significant one, where you said, okay, should have listened to myself more than others. So any detail you can give us there.
There were quite a few, and it's not really a watershed moment, because like I said, it's not like one specific big thing that just happened and turned my life upside down. It was more like a collection of a couple of different ones. It's pretty mundane stuff, to be honest. It's like changing your job at the appropriate time, like not waiting for it longer, just doing it faster and doing it quicker. But I do have an example from the other side. So a moment when some people told me that it's a bad decision, and eventually turned out to be a good one. And that is when I was changing my major at the university, because we did mention that we studied together for some time and that we majored in English, but there were 2 years where I was studying Swedish philology, right? Of course, you know that, but our audience doesn't. And I just felt that. And actually, right now, the more I think of it, the more it fits into what we are talking about, because that was a gut decision, really. I did think about it a lot. I did try to rationalize it. But at the end of the day, like the main reason was that I just didn't feel it, that I just wanted to do something else. In that case, that was English, because I felt that, even though we could say that, oh, the job market was looking at it this way, or, it was more profitable to stay with a more niche language, let's say, if you are inclined to doing languages. So that would be a an quote unquote objectively better choice. But at the end of the day, I decided to go with my gut. So, and I think that that was probably the first time I did it to such a degree and with a decision with such an impact. And actually, I just realized that right now. So it's a big moment, like for me on your podcast. So
Cool, cool.
yeah. So and there were people who told me that that's this like the worst decision of my life. And there are always, you are also a comic book nerd, right? So
Yeah.
we both know a lot about multiverses and bubble universes and all that. And there is a universe where things happen differently. And in that universe, we are not sitting across each other because we wouldn't have met, for example. And maybe I
Exactly.
wouldn't have my band. And of course, it doesn't mean that that would be a completely bad or a worse universe, even. But I think, again, this is my or at least original to me. A thought original to me right now. I think that the outcome would probably be very, very similar in that I would also ditch that and go in this direction, but it would take me more time.
I see. Understand. I'm glad you're mentioning the band because that's where I wanted to go next. Yeah. But in terms of multiverses, that's kind of part of why I wanted to start the show because, like, I feel like myself, I'm a person who was on a path. Like, I could see the original multiverse for myself, and that was related to the university we both went to. I was studying English, conference interpreting as as the major specialization, and I was gonna be a teacher, an interpreter, translator, all that good stuff. And for myself, I'll record a solo episode about it probably at some point. Because, I met a life coach. I got interested in self development. I started doing small marketing tasks for him. He introduced me to Toastmasters, to LinkedIn. I started meeting people who were on a completely different path. I got into IT, into marketing, and it all changed. And I feel like myself, I'm an alternate version of like the main universe, Kuba.
Cuba Prime.
Yeah. So yeah, Kuba. Well, I mean, I'm the primest there is, but anyway. However, I did want to talk with you, and definitely, knowing that I'm going to have you on the show, I can't let you go without grilling you for at least a little while on creativity and on music, right? And let's start, as the jumping off point, let's treat what you mentioned already before. I'm curious about a bunch of things. How does intuition connect to music? Does being a musician help you grow your intuition? Did it kind of translate to other areas of your life? Tell me about, what it's like to be in that creative process and the role intuition plays in it.
All right. That's a very good question. And I am going to attack it from a little bit of a different angle, if you allow me. And that is, we talked about intuition, but I think that one aspect of what we talked about is also connected to self acceptance and liking yourself and appreciating yourself a little bit more. It connects to all of that what we were talking about, and it does play a huge part in music, I think, and it's actually a moment of realization I had like 2 or 3 years ago. It came from focusing on singing a little bit more because my first and main instrument was guitar, always has been, always will be. And when you are a guitar player, and I guess that you will relate wholeheartedly,
Yeah.
is that, especially in today's world, you go on Instagram, you go on TikTok, you go on YouTube, and you have a 7-year-old kid who does what you do 100 times better, or does something that you will never be able to do because you don't have the time to do that. You don't have the physical characteristics or, whatever. So if your goal is if you're naive enough to think that you can be the best in the world at something, you will probably fail because there will always be someone better than you at an activity or at a skill. But there will never be someone who is better than you at being you. And I know it sounds again very trite,
I'm listening. I'm
but
following.
but what I mean is like again, especially in today's world with AI music, for example, with a lot of AI generated content and a lot of what I do consider a word that is dirtier than fuck, and the word is content.
Oh no.
I hate
I'm
the
a
word
content marketer. Oh crap.
I hate the word content. I despise it
Okay.
with my entire being because when the CEO of Spotify goes out and says that, yeah, the process of creating music is creating content and it's very full, it's full of friction and it's bad and people don't like to do it. So what we would like to have is, everyone using AI and doing their music with prompting and it happens in a flash. That's the spiel right now. So when you have a lot of that and what I consider background noise to like true human creativity and true original thought, the only thing you can combat this is being yourself and being original and drawing from your own experiences, drawing from your own life, drawing from your way of viewing the world, music, and whatever else. Because like I said, there will always be that 8-year-old Chinese, Russian, German, American girl or boy that does it better, but they don't have your experiences, your collection of different moments in life and your reflections, and they won't construct a lyric in this way, or they won't write music with this intention, right?
Yes.
So this is what I believe is true, and the way I sort of came to accept that is, first of all, I got older and I had a job and I knew that I cannot play guitar for 16 hours straight and get better at that. That's one thing. And I watched probably too many of those 9-year-old kids on Instagram.
Yeah, playing Through the Fire and Flames. Yeah, I've seen them. I've seen
Exactly.
them.
Exactly. Yeah. And the second thing is when I started singing more, I think it's also like a little bit of a common experience with a lot of people that you hate your recorded voice. You don't really like it, right? Because it sounds weird to you because of like all of the resonance that our skull and our sinuses and everything is doing. Your voice to you, the way you are accustomed to it, sounds totally different to how it sounds to other people's.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
people say that they hate their recorded voice.
I have
And
that. I have that with my singing voice, definitely. Like, show me a recording of myself singing, and I'll run out the room. I have grown accustomed to it though when it comes to speaking, because I mean, I've done like over 100 podcast episodes at this point, plus some webinars, speech recordings, and stuff like that. But yeah, that definitely tracks for singing. Why is it for singing specifically? Sounds different, more personal, more emotion. I'm not sure, or I'm just bad at it.
those are possibilities. Well, singing is skill as another skill, so you can get better at it, right? So I'm not saying that that everyone is good at it and everyone should love their singing voice. No, what I mean is that of course you can better at it. If that's something that is important to you, you should do it. But it just came to a point where I was listening to some of the tracks that I laid down, and I thought that um maybe I don't like the tone of my voice, or I would like maybe like I don't like maybe I would like to change it in a way or do something to it, the timbre, let's say. But then I
Uh-huh.
realized that you can do all of that on the guitar with digital processing, with effects, with amplifiers, cabinets, with all. You can do that with your voice if you want to preserve the human aspect of it and
Uh-huh.
not have it sound like AI autotune or whatever, then you can't. So you have to accept it. You have to accept that this is my voice, this is the way I sound, and whether you like it or not, you need to accept it. And it's best that you come to like it at least. And when you asked about experiences and thoughts and transferring from one area of your life to another, so this is sort of something that I'm still transferring to other avenues of my life, and that is accepting that there is a set of skills, a set of qualities that make me, and this is something that you need to accept at some point, because you can spend your entire life trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, but there comes a moment when you have to realize that you just can't, and it's okay. It's okay. It's absolutely okay, because you talked about unsatisfying conclusions, and this is a very unsatisfying conclusion, that you will never be 100% guru master of anything.
Sure.
You can spend your entire life learning about music, for example, but there's so many avenues. You have multiple instruments. You have singing, you have production, you have mixing, mastering, songwriting, lyric writing, making beats, rapping, whatever. There's so many more that I probably forgot about. And you can spend probably your entire life just doing one of these, and there will always be something that you can learn that you haven't done. For example, if you
Yeah.
decide to devote your time and effort and intellectual and physical capacity to playing guitar, you can play everything that was written in the Western catalog for the next decades. But you will miss out on Japanese music, you will miss out on Middle Eastern music, you will miss out on a lot of things. So the point here is that you need to just accept it, that whatever comes out of you creatively is a product of your inspirations, of your experiences, of your thoughts, of your emotions, of your intuitions, of your subconscious. And it's a cocktail that is unique. And of course, you can mold it a little bit. You can make it better, whatever better means in this context, whatever it means to you.
Mhm.
But it is a form that you cannot hammer it into something that it isn't.
Yeah. I mean, it almost feels like, I mean, depends on what people are motivated by. You mentioned before that you're motivated by challenges, so I can certainly see why you would look at, this mountain, this peak of, totally 100% mastering a skill. But what comes to mind though is that it's kind of like you said, they can be better than you at playing guitar. They won't be better than you at being you. And it's almost like, I'm thinking of the times we played together, or even any music band, there's the skills of the people involved are always like an unspoken creative constraint. And you can stretch them to a point, but you can't have a band of 100 people, and if there's if there's a chorus that requires growls, somebody is going to growl it the best it possibly can be. But then when it's clean vocals, somebody else sings it. That's not what this is about. You have to do the best that you can with what you've got. One, and two, just look for the unique flavor that only you can bring. I feel like that's how people really find success in creative endeavors. And on the subject of like mastering the guitar, for example, I know you listen to a lot of artists who are virtuosos on the guitar, right? They do stuff I've never thought would be possible, right? They play just the acoustic guitar and it sounds like a whole band, with the percussive movements and everything. Great. At the same time, the best music in the world, I'm not saying the most popular, but some of the best music in the world is so deceptively simple, like I don't know, like Enter Sandman, for example. It's a generational song for us. People love it of all walks of life, all ages, and it's quite a simple song at the end of the day to perform, for example. So I think there's definitely something to that. What I would like to ask you about next is, I would love to zoom in on your process of composing music, right? Because you don't only play, you also compose, you create. Paint a picture here. You're working on a new song. We talked about intuition, talked about experience, talked about being analytical too. That might play a role here. How do you make all of these small minute to minute, second to second decisions of how you compose a piece? Because for every single thing that you do you ever think about like the amount of possibilities you can play the same riff once, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 10 times? All of it is a decision. Change the modality, change the tempo, change everything, right? How do you not get lost in all of that? What's the actual compass for you when you create music?
All right. That's a really nice question. Kudos. I think that when you think too much about possibilities, it's crippling because on the one hand, the opportunities that the modern world gives us are amazing. If you play keyboards, for example, you can have millions of presets of different ways the keyboards can sound at your fingertips. A lot of them are free, a lot of them sound great. And what happens to a lot of people, and it's not just me or my friends, but even if you listen to the top artists in interviews, they often say that they do have that paralysis that you spend like 2 hours looking for the perfect preset. And it can be the same with decisions in songwriting too. So what I'm trying to do, and again, right now I had one realization, is that when composing, what I do is I am making an MVP as the first version, because I think that it's pretty much the same with books. when you need to have a second draft and a third draft and a fourth draft and whatever. Is the same with, movies where you cut them down or you change things around. It's the
Right.
same with music. And I think that another interesting thing about music, and that's I think unique to this form of art, maybe with along with theater. So theater and music, I think, are pretty much the only thing in opera that are that have that possibility, is that when you release a book or a movie, it's done. It doesn't change. However, the aspect of music that you can perform it, you can play it live, either on a show or with your friends in the rehearsal room, is that it could have been released 10 years ago, but the version that you are producing right now can be vastly different. And it's something that might be frustrating to some people when they hear a different version live, because they grew up with Enter Sandman, for example, played note for note, but they come to the arena and they hear it played differently. But I think that's beautiful, and I think that gives you an experience that's unique to that moment in time that you share with the people around you and with the artists. And even if you're a basement rehearsal room band, it's also super satisfying and super interesting to me to watch it evolve and to participate in that, because even songs that we together played dozens of times are still changing, because first of all, I get bored out of my skull if I have to do the same thing. And I'm probably one of the worst guitar players to jam with, because when you see that I am doing one thing on the fretboard, say, oh, I can dial in, I understand it now, then I do something different because I
By
get
the
bored.
time I'm there, you're already 2 steps ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not ahead, maybe just in a different place. So I get bored. And the second thing is that I also have more knowledge, more experience, so I can think of things that I wouldn't have thought before. And it's changing, but it's also evolving in a way. So this is something that I think is really, really great about it. So even when you say that something is done, released, let's say, to the world, it can still change and evolve. So I would say that I don't really ruminate that much on these small decisions, because that would paralyze you completely. So you just do an MVP. And sometimes you can even start with something really, really simple. And it's actually, I think, a good exercise for creativity. Um, because you could start with just single notes, for example, and pick 4 notes and just play them, like, with a steady beat, 1, 2, 3, 4, and just do like this. And then take it up a notch with rhythmic variation, let's say. You can do triplets, and then you can go a step further and introduce melodic variation, and for maybe add some notes to make those not single notes, but make them chords. Then you can add transitions between those notes. And when you go those couple of levels higher, then you end up with something completely different. And you end up with something that's would probably be really difficult to recognize, that it started with just these 4 simple notes, but you added complexity and beauty that makes it something completely different.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally feel that. I have a couple. I mean, I love talking about creativity, so I have a couple thoughts here, definitely. First of all, you talked about these presets, and then you kind of circled back to having a simple palette. And that's the word I wanted to kind of mention. When you're working with digital tools, the palette is infinite, and that can be totally a problem, you know? So that's definitely something that I would encourage people to do as well, is like limit your palette, It's just you've got just these 4 notes, these 4 colors, or whatever else you're going to go with here, right? Or you can't do dialogue, or you have to do only dialogue if you're writing, for example, right? And see how far you can get with that, and then fill in the rest. Like, people think that music is created, but sometimes it's more constructed than created, like layer by layer, right? Even with books, people, I don't think, always recognize the different kinds of edits that you can do. You can do story editing, and then you can do like structural editing, and then you do line editing. More detailed each time, like with sculpting, for example. With sculpting, it's so clear because you kind of see what you need to do, figure out the big parts first, then add in detail. I mean, a sculptor, I am not, right? But I've seen the process. So that's definitely one thing there. And to some, yeah.
Can I touch up on that?
Yeah,
And I
definitely.
promise to be brief. I'm a big believer in that, when what you said, and that is that you should limit yourself, because otherwise the possibilities are virtually infinite. Maybe not in the mathematical sense, but in the sense of our feeble human minds. When you
Sure.
have 2,000 presets to choose from, this is basically infinite. And again, coming back to something that I said like 5 hours ago, is that you can look at it in two different ways. You can think at this like, this is a limitation. I am, uh, confining myself to a box. Or you can think at it as, this is my first decision. I decide to do it like this. So it's not a limitation, it's a decision.
Right.
It's a
Yeah.
small difference, but I think it might make a huge difference.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And it's something that, it's a reframe, right? And reframes are really, really useful because then it's almost like, okay, this is the playground that I'm playing in, at this time. And certainly there's something to be said, to the effect of what you said about like performing. I love performing. I loved performing with you as part of Omegalodon because like there's always this element of unpredictable randomness, chaos, improvisation. We touched upon that before. And I think for the last kind of beat of our story here, why do you think people like us are drawn to improvisation so much? Like for you, what is it like for you that makes it so, I guess people call it exciting, but you said we're crazy. Why do you think people go crazy for that?
Hmm. I have thoughts. I think
Don't you? Good, good.
think there is an element of danger to it, because it's the same with interpreting, especially simultaneous interpreting. So for those who might not be like super familiar with it, it's when you sit in a booth and you have to pretty much do interpreting in real time. This is basically a very similar concept
Yeah,
where,
like in the European Parliament, for example, they do simultaneous interpreting all the time.
exactly, yeah, thank you. It's very good to have it in context. Yeah. So what I really loved about it is that it's like really fleeting, right? And whatever you say, it's done. You cannot rewind. You cannot control or command Z. It's
Yeah,
just
no
it's
time to ruminate on what happened because here comes the next sentence and the next and the next.
exactly.
Yeah,
And at least the way I approached it is that I felt a huge responsibility to the audience. And whenever I would stumble or whenever I would have feelings of doubt and thinking that I can't do this, I'd say, okay, but I am failing all of those people. They came here to listen, to learn, to be entertained, and I am providing a service to them, and I am failing them. Luckily, I think I didn't botch up a lot of stuff. I even don't have an example from my head.
it's a hypothetical, right? If you were to stop interpreting at that moment, you would be failing them. To
Exactly.
draw upon all the cool tenses we learned during university.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's this element of danger. Second thing is when you have that feeling of responsibility like I had, and this being conscious of the gravity of everything and of the difficulty, then when you can do it at the end of the day, it's hugely rewarding, and it shows you that you can. Because again, when it comes to us being paralyzed by something, we can be paralyzed by choices that are too wide and too many, but it can also be paralyzed with fear of that, that I probably won't be able to do it. I think I'm not able to do it, so I won't, right? And this improvisational aspect just throws you in that situation in the deep end where you have to try it. And, at the end of the day, you might fail or you might not, but you will try. And if you succeed, then it feels great. And
Yeah,
the third thing is that, at least in music, because we talked about being rational and maybe constructing and all of that, but the way I try to look at music right now and composing is less about like the clockwork of it. And I'm not bringing anybody down here. I think there's a lot of great music that's constructed with great thought when it comes to rhythm and and melody and intertwining lines and all that. And I also wrote some stuff like this that was like really mental, let's say.
yeah.
But the way I try to approach it right now is to sort of try and find that unique element of, you being you and having it as expression of emotion or thought. And with improvisation, it's like a stream of consciousness, right? So it's creativity that is not bound by your bullshit. It's not bound by, the world's bullshit or anything else. It's just, you in this particular moment in time, just letting yourself go, letting it rip.
Exactly. I feel that. Now, this is bringing me to very interesting thoughts on AI, of all things. This is making me think about AI and about how creation is commodified. You can create anything, you can generate, right? Generate. That's another dirty word that I would say is in my, forbidden dictionary. You can generate anything, generate text, generate audio, generate images. And I think in a world where creation is commodified, performance is like the one remaining frontier of what is still real. You can't make the AI perform the thing. You can't make it come up on stage and actually connect with people and actually perform the song. This is probably why people get so, frustrated with like playback when, when people perform, because they want the real thing with the imperfections, with the changes, with everything in there. And I think that's part of why it's so rewarding, is like it's real. This is not just something we recorded or generated. It's something we can perform in front of y'all, and you can feel that we're having fun doing it. I'm reminded, I'm taken back to like the gigs that we did together. That's why, part of why it felt so great.
Yeah, and funny you should say that because I don't think I sent you this video, but I watched a video essay on YouTube a couple of days ago by Adam Neely. He's mainly a bass player, but he's also
I know him. Yeah.
super. Yeah, I know you do, but maybe the rest doesn't.
Yeah. Sorry for context, of course.
For context, yeah, but he's also super knowledgeable when it comes to music theory and production and all of that. And he made a pretty long video essay about AI in music, and he didn't go into. That's why I love watching his essays, because he didn't go into the obvious lanes, and he didn't go at it from the perspective of AI bad, and that's obvious, that's it. But like the conclusion was actually what you said, and that is that the performance, the live performance especially, is the final frontier where you cannot generate it. And even going with that a little bit further is that some people might say, yeah, but it's possible actually even right now, because you can jam with AI. You can do it. I never tried it, and I never tried any of that software, but it is possible, but it sucks.
Okay.
The results suck. Like AI cannot be that, truly creative in that moment. And of course there is an argument to be made here that, things are changing so quickly, they are so mercurial, and you can have the next evolution of the model in a month that can, blow it out of the water right now. It's possible, but at the end of the day, I think that, at least I would like to believe that this is true, that this is the final frontier actually, and that this will matter, and this will mean something to people still in 10, 50, 100 years.
Maybe. And this is like me being Delulu a little bit, but maybe that's what finally gets us, a little bit more offline and a little bit more towards interacting with each other. Because like even in marketing, for example, people are leaning more towards in-person events, because at least that's real. At least that can't be faked anymore. Maybe the slides are generated, but the presentation isn't. The conversations aren't, even though I am seeing that people are starting to talk like ChatGPT even without using ChatGPT, and that is a whole other can of worms, and it's terrifying, right? So I think, maybe there'll be this huge silver lining to all of this, that, okay, if I can't trust anything that's, showing up on my screen of doom, maybe I should just go out, meet people, go to a live concert, go to live gigs of underground bands like Omegalodon. This is very important. The only takeaway from this episode. That's why we
Right.
did it.
Preach.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I agree, because like the way I look at it, it was with a lot of things, and it's not an original thought. It's the way you apply it, I think, matters. It's the pendulum, right? When new ideas, new concepts, new technologies presented, like the pendulum swings one way, because
Yeah.
even though we talked about balance, and everyone talks a lot about balance, human beings suck at it, really. You have to really work really, really hard at it. So with a lot of things, with politics, with economics, with ideas, with pretty much everything, with art, the pendulum swings wildly into one direction. And I think that we aren't even at the apex of the pendulum swinging towards AI. We will probably move a little bit more in that direction. But I think I would like to believe that uh, that's um, that it will swing back a little bit, at least to the center point. And what you said about people speaking like ChatGPT, I have another example here because from the world of music, there's a lot of music producers talking about young people who are sort of conditioned by music that was created post, let's say, 2005. And for example, if all they listen to is I don't know, technical death metal, like everything they heard is the drums being played in a very specific way and then being triggered. And it's also true to pop music, for example, where the drums are in 99% of cases they what is called being they are being quantized, and that means
Hmm.
that they are being put on a rigid grid,
Yeah,
so there's
yeah.
no swing.
Precisely on the beat, no
Exactly.
organic variance in there.
Yeah, yeah. So you don't have like even a millisecond delay or push forward or whatever. And an interesting effect of it is that a lot of those young drummers right now, they play like this. And we thought that it's impossible for human beings because we thought that you cannot play like a robot, but it actually happens right now. And the second thing is singers who actually start to sound a little bit like autotune, and it's mind blowing for me. Like, but it does actually happen.
Am I
So
rushing or am I dragging? It's
yeah,
neither. Not anymore.
not anymore. Exactly. Yeah. So you don't need to hit me. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was thinking of that movie. Whiplash, was it, right? Never seen it, but
Whiplash.
I've seen the clips
Oh,
anyway.
it's a great movie. You would love
Yeah.
it.
Okay, well, I will put it in the show notes, I guess, for anybody who hasn't seen it. Speaking of the show notes and speaking of the show, Adek, I really appreciate the conversation we had here today.
Same here.
We could keep going. I'm trying to kind of think of like the format of the show, how long I want the episodes to be. So we'll be winding down just a little bit. While we're winding down, is there anything else that you wanted to mention within, related to your connection, related to the many topics we touched upon, something that, somebody's listening to this, thinking about these things, being intuitive versus analytical, being creative, maybe succeeding as a leader, anything that you want to impart on them?
Well, if there's one thought that I would like to leave anyone with, and that would be balance. I think that we should always be seeking balance, whether it is with the time that you spent on things, or whether it is with your reactions to things, or whether it is your approach to yourself, to others, to whatever you do. I think that we should strive for balance, and it doesn't mean that you always hit it. You can be a little bit off. You're not a machine. You're not quantized,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you can always be a little bit off. You can rush a little bit or drag a little bit, but the idea is that you don't swing the pendulum too far. And if you do, then just coming back to it. So balance achieved through self-reflection. So
Yeah.
basically just asking yourself a lot of questions. And that's I won't go on a tangent. I promise. Two sentences. And that
Yeah.
is that, like you said, in the world of a lot of generation and digital experiences and whatnot, it's about speaking to one another, like to the real people, but also about like what I call to myself, and this talking to myself. And it's like not really like talking, of course you can do that, but like talking in your head. And just basically taking, some might call it meditation or a form
Hmm.
of therapy maybe, but just taking a moment where you just sit with yourself and think about, just reflect.
Yeah, yeah. Just make that part of the, any decision-making process of, okay, but what does Radek think? What does Kuba think, right? And in the case of,
Yeah.
yeah, what do you think? Ask that self that question and see
And
what
why?
arises and why. That's a good one. Also on the subject of balance, I feel like a lot of, well, maybe not a lot of people, but I'm seeing it and I've done it, I'll admit. where people think about balance and they think that the way to achieve balance is to mix everything all at once. What I mean is, I'm having balance because I'm working on a task at my job, but also I'm with my friends on like Discord, or maybe it's going to be TeamSpeak soon, you know? For me, that's not balance, you know? Maybe that's a sometimes food or something that you can do sometimes, but like we try to do a lot of things at once. I would say what I would add to what you said is balance, but also focus, right? We are wired to focus at certain things at certain points. Like you can't sleep for 30 minutes and then work for 30 minutes and then sleep for 30 minutes. You get my point, right? So you also need to like intentionally focus that like within this balance, within this budget of I've got a day, I've got a week, I've got a month, I've got a year, okay? For certain chunks of it, you're going to focus more on one, you're going to focus more on another, and try not to mix everything together, because with, constant, people listening to podcasts all the time, YouTube in the background all the time, second screen viewing all the time. I feel like that's really what's kind of frying our brains these days. And again, guilty, very guilty of this. But, if I were to put something out in the world adding on to what you said, I would say that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and it's actually one thing that really surprised me from a friend of work, that he said that he's listening to music in the background all the time,
All the
and
time.
all the time. And of course, I said, yeah. So, like when you're going to the shop, or when you're cleaning your apartment or whatever, yeah, I do that too. He said, no. He said, so you have music on right now when we are on a call. He said, yeah. I said,
What? Okay.
that's crazy to me. Like, imagine me in headphones right now with, I don't know, Dope Smoker, right? Or, some technical death metal, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or even like ambient sounds, in the background. But still, that was surprising to me.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that's why I like doing something like this, like recording this show. This is finally something that occupies 100% of my attention. I could not be having this conversation and listening to music. And that's a good thing. That's actually a good thing, and it relaxes me in a way. Put a pin in that. Maybe we'll do, I don't know, a follow-up episode at some point. One last question is taking it back to the idea of the show. The show is about connections. And as we're coming to an end, I would like you to also think about who you would like to connect with through this show. Right now, this is the very beginning. It's the ground floor. You never know who this is going to reach. So if this was going to reach a type of person, or maybe even a specific person, who would you like it to reach that, would listen to this conversation, benefit from it, or maybe just somebody you would like to meet and talk with? What comes to mind?
Man, I have so many answers. there's the
James Hetfield? Okay.
there are the obvious ones, and the let's say the ones that come to mind with some fiduciary benefits. So clients for Force of Nature, or listeners of my band Omegalodon,
Yeah, sure.
come to me. No, but when you mentioned like a specific person, then Nicolas Cage, Mr. Cage, if you are listening, if you like these ideas, please. My email is easy to find. You know,
Yes.
I will go wherever, whenever, to have a 15-minute conversation with you. But like, to be completely honest, um, if someone listens to our conversation and just thinks that, it makes sense to them, or maybe that's something that they would like to try on their own, and they have a positive experience from that, then then it's great.
Yeah, and I think we touched upon a lot of different topics here, so there's going to be something for everyone in this one. And then I don't know, cut it up into clips, cut it up into segments. I haven't thought so much about the repurposing of it all yet, but we definitely got good material today. So Radek, I mean, this is marketer speak of the highest order, right? I'm thinking of this in terms of content, and I apologize. I apologize for using that dirty word as you said it.
You
Anyway,
can bleep
Radek,
it out.
yeah, I'm gonna sure, as soon as I learn to do it in Riverside. But Radek, I want to thank you so much for the conversation. I have been teasing this idea of the show for almost 2 years, and finally we got to do it. Were you surprised when I reached out and said, it's happening?
A little bit, but I was surprised by maybe at the fact with that, it's happening right now. But I don't think I doubted that it would happen. I thought, yeah, I think I was pretty convinced that it would happen one day.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that was also, tying it back to what you said earlier, that was also an intuition kind of thing. I can't explain it in words, but in my gut, I felt like I'm now in a place where this needs to happen. And it is, and it has. And I thank you for it. So
Thank
thank you
you.
for coming on the show. I'll leave, the kind of ways to contact you, especially for Mr. Cage, right? Uh,
Oh, please do.
in the show notes. And that's all for today. This has been the Silken Spider podcast. And I would like to thank you, watchers and listeners, so, so, so much for joining us here today. And I'll see you next time.
Thanks for having
Bye
me.
bye.
Thank you for listening.
Yes. Thanks.